My name is Nikola Matyushenko, and I represent Fintech Latvia Association, and I'm truly happy to greet you all here at the Fintech Breakfast, Unraveling Fintech Innovation, which is the first of this season. Uh, Fintech Breakfast is a regular series of events brought to you by Fintech Latvia Association. We started strong last year with our first season, and this is our second, and I'm truly happy to greet you all here on the first event of this season. Our main objective is to promote dialogue between members of the ecosystem and the decision makers, shape the regulatory framework, and effectively exchange knowledge and ideas. Before I proceed to and give word to our partners today, TerraSky, I would like to remind you that Fintech Latvia Association is open for collaboration on the Fintech Breakfast events and the Fintech Pulse 2024, as well as accepting new members. And now, Maris, do you want to introduce our partner here, Maris from TerraSky?
Yes, hello. I believe I will switch straight to English, but I can runāt latviski as well. So if you have any questions in latviski, then please proceed. Yes, about today, if we take from one side Monolith, very full of simplicity, stability. On the other hand, we have Microservices, basically the warriors of innovations and the king of scalability, I would say. Today we'll clash them together and maybe get some answers or not. I don't know, we'll see. But if you are here, then you are just as much eager to know some opinions, some ideas, where to go, what to look, what is actual today, what is important from security point and from scalability and others. So just as me, I'm interested in how this discussion will end. So I, from my side, hope that you will have a very interesting time today. But before we proceed to these interesting sessions with Justas and Ben, let me spare some 5 minutes about telling about company TerraSky, because maybe you can raise hands who know TerraSky, what it is. Very many hands. That's good. No, but that's okay, because actually, to be honest, I will take clicker, but we have started to talk more about TerraSky only during this year, because till this year, basically, we were working in incoming projects from VMware and Google. We were making these solutions for corporate and government clients in USA, in Israel, in the Baltic states, in Ukraine, and we haven't talked so much about in public what we are doing. So we decided that we have gathered so many expertise, so have good case studies that maybe it's worth to share. So yeah, our company basically was founded approximately 13 years ago. As I already told, we have headquarters in Tel Aviv, but we are located in all 3 Baltic states. This is our office as well, office building, I would say. So it's a couple of floors below, but if you're driving along, please feel free to call me. Let's have a coffee and talk about not only Monolith versus microservices, but other IT related topics as well. And of course, London, New York, as already mentioned, and so on. Basically, we are senior expertise people, around 300 scattered around the world. Today with us, we have a couple of colleagues from Lithuania as well. So Justas is our CTO. We have Arkadis. Arkadis is our Latvia team. He's delivery manager. And then we have, I don't see, but they are somewhere behind. We have Marcus, who is our business manager, and we have Dmitry, who is our CEO as well. And nevertheless, we have Ben. Ben is basically our, I would say, I don't see Ben here as well. He's in the, hi Ben. He's a big friend of TerraSky, but I believe he will tell some words about himself a little bit later. But what we do, so basically, to be very short and not to bore you, so we can jump in a real topic, I will tell very briefly. So basically, I would say we have 3 strength vectors coming from TerraSky. One is Google Cloud and all the ecosystem that is surrounding it. This year, we actually won in Eastern Europe and Central Europe Partner of the Year status, not as a reseller or a consultant, but a managed service partner. So basically, we know not only how to resell Google Cloud products or how to make architecture on drawing, let's call it like that, but we have hands and knowledge how to implement and support all of this. So this is one thing. Second thing is VMware, because maybe you saw some banners as well. Regarding VMware, we are the only ones in Baltic states who has the highest pinnacle status, which of course gives our clients better prices. But the most important part, I think, is that we have this expertise in building the products on VMware. And we're not talking only about legacy stuff like vSphere or vCenter. We're talking about much more like multi-cloud management tools, containerizations, and so on. So this is our strength point. And third, as we're coming from Israel, of course, we have very strong IT security portfolio. And we have actually our chief security officer, Giedrius, but I don't see him as well. He's somewhere behind here. So if you have any questions about security and want to discuss, we are open to it. Basically, we have the IT security portfolio starting from endpoint security, DLP, penetration tests, ending with CM or fully managed SOC services. So we're happy to share what we have and our knowledge, and we can discuss about this. So it's very briefly about us. Just wanted to give you some picture about TerraSky, where we are strong, and what maybe could be useful and someday for you as well. So not to waste any more time, thank you for bearing marketing slides with me. I will give a word to our Chief Technical Officer, Justas. Please come here, the floor is yours.
Since I'm CTO, technology decided to give us some work. So don't worry about microservices. If you don't know the term or monolith, I am here to give you very fast crash course what it is, so that you would not be intimidated in later discussions and feel comfortable what it is about. It will not be too technical presentation or discussion, just to match everyone's level. So our agenda, we will go through introduction to microservices. We will discuss key concepts. I will show you benefits. I will go through challenges, what we encounter implementing microservices, what are the best practices, some examples of potential use cases for fintech companies, and conclusion. By the way, questions you can ask anytime, just raise a hand and I will answer them during the presentation. So what is microservices? Microservices is architecture philosophy, how you design your application. So you probably heard the term monolith. This is usually what our current legacy systems are working, especially in banking sector. And in monolith architecture, we have all the layers, all the components, basically either in the same code or in the same server or in the same stack. So we have UI, core system, application level, presentation, everything, usually running on one or more servers, but it's like one chunk. You log into a system and everything. And usually it has single database where the functions are distributed between different tables, and that's it. So how microservices are different from this architecture, that we split our main application into the separate functions, and each of them exists as a separate system. It has its own database. It can have its own programming language. For example, core service can be written in Java. Some ML stuff usually is written in Python, and so on and so on. And these services, they communicate with each other through the API or some service bus and work independently. And main thing is that you can scale them independently, or if one of them crashes, your main system stays online and gives a better user experience. So as following microservices. So key concepts are that you use any database for specific service, because specific functions usually work best with your database. So for example, for a search service or your user data, the best database is Elasticsearch. And of course, you can use some SQL database for that one, but Elastic is much more fit for that. And in microservices, you easily can do that because you can choose for that part a specific database. Also, these services usually interact between themselves using REST APIs. This is like default. gRPC is the second one. And you can scale them independently, as I said. If you follow cloud native standards, that means that each service can be scaled independently horizontally, and you can match the load or react to failures. So what are the benefits? So as I said, you are flexible when you are developing in microservices. So you can start with MVP, so the most core functions you need, and you can develop independently. This is the key concept, that since each microservice lives in its own world, it's not dependent on another one on development phase. That means you can have distribute development to the parallel teams, and we are not blocked by each other. So for example, if you want to add some features in the UI, you don't need to wait until core team finishes their thing. You can add them in advance and just agree on a protocol, which leads to much faster development, except in Monolith, where you have to put all the features into releases, wait a few months until testing is done, and then go to production. As mentioned, scalability. Since each microservice can be scaled independently, you can easily scale only parts you need, and you can scale horizontally. So your application can utilize the resource efficiently, and that's very important running in cloud, where you can get resources basically on demand, and you can make use of this concept the best, because you have a traffic burst, you scale it, handle the traffic, for example, at the end of the year, downscale for the rest of the year, and do not overpay for infrastructure. And the same feature gives you resilience. If one part crashes, whole system stays online, and users with most work with reduced functionality. But what challenges do we get when going with microservices? Because in Monolith, it's pretty easy. You have one developer team, they work on a product, they know it end to end, and develop whole stack. So when going microservices, suddenly you have different languages, different technologies, different databases. So these teams usually grow, and we need to interact. So it's a challenge to coordinate between themselves. So there we have to have strong architecture, strong guideline set, and everything. Other thing from performance-wise, in Monolith, usually these services are running in the same system, and they interact with syscalls or share a memory. So interactions between are very fast. But when you introduce microservices, they can be running on containers or virtual machines or even separate physical machines. We add this network latency. And in some architectures, that can increase latency by a lot if you are doing like sequential requests, not parallel ones. But that also has to be accounted in the architecture. And some data management issues can arise if you are like not synchronizing data between microservices properly, or you have not implemented it. All right, what is the source of truth, or what are the replicas? And another very important thing, I would say, that without implementing DevOps culture in your company, microservices implementation can be challenging, because with increased complexity, to tackle that, you need to have some automation in place. And the more automation you have, the better microservices work. And doing it the old way with manual releases, manual deployments, with sufficient size of the system, microservices can be just too slow for you if you are not following DevOps practices. So what are the best practices implementing microservices? So on what, how to say, pitfalls do not encounter. So first, choose what to put into microservice. If you have one function of a system and split it between 3 microservices, but from a helicopter view, it does one function, and if you remove it from your whole application, and it cannot work independently, it's not like 3 microservices. It's still like monolith, but you just distributed it. So microservice definition should be at least it has to work independently and does not crash. So if you have like multiple parts of it, do not follow it. Another one is use API gateway. Do not expose microservices directly to end client, because API gateway can offload some authorization, rate limiting, and other functions from microservice, input some protections from DDoS and so on. And third part is monitoring. In microservices and containers, whole concept how you monitor your systems changes from compared to monoliths. And monolith, usually you just install some monitoring agent, get some custom metrics, and that's it. And in microservices, you have to change the whole approach, use different tools, and gather the metrics in different way. And third one is testing. So have as much as automated and integrated testing as possible. And here is from my very good source, Byte by Go, for architecture diagrams, also same principles in graphical way. So we also recommend containers, but it's not a must. As I said, microservices you can implement even with physical servers. It's not about where you run it, it's about philosophy, how you run it. And I have covered some use cases for fintech. So, for example, payment processing can be split into separate microservices where we can have payment gateway service developed as a one microservices and added to your architecture. We can have fraud detection as another microservice. And why it's a good example, because it's like full functionality. So if we remove it, we lose one function of your whole system, but whole system can act without it. You just will be working in reduced functionality. So for KYC service also can be developed and worked as a separate service. And in conclusion, so what microservices can give us? It gives us faster development time, and you can develop separate features in parallel. It gives you horizontal scaling, which you can react with load, and it increases your resiliency. And in turn, these two give you faster time to market. Instead of like working under the hood for 1 or 2 years on your product, you can release it feature by feature, but as fast as you can basically develop it. And that's basically it. Quick crash course into microservices. So. Then, unless some questions are, I can answer. Ben, stage is yours.
1, 2, 3. Works. Thanks. Hi, good morning. Labrit. That's pretty much where my Latvian language ends. My name is Ben. I came this morning from Lisbon. Normally, I'm based in Amsterdam. I'm a CEO and founder of a company called Plumery. We are building digital engagement platform for banks and banking companies, fintech, digital wallets, and similar type of organizations. We'll talk about Plumery a little bit later, but today our topic is unlocking enterprise agility. So I'll try to elevate a little bit the microservices topic to the level of enterprise architecture and how does it fit when we want to compose different bigger applications together to fulfill certain needs of a business. Yeah, so let's kind of recap a little bit what Justus already told and look into what microservices are. Maybe a little bit more from fundamental principles, right? We already discussed a bit what benefits we're trying to achieve, but how we do that, what principles do we need to apply to achieve that. So generally, when we talk about microservices, or in a broader sense about decoupled systems, we have four things in mind. They have to be independent, they have to be loosely coupled, they have to communicate with each other using some sort of API driven communication, and they should enable polyglot programming. So let's try and unpack each of it a little bit separately. So independent services. Well, this is pretty easy to understand, right? It's all about taking functionality of a system and decomposing it into individual services that can run independently. That's very basic principle. When we just take it from a first glance. Then comes loose coupling, right? And what loose coupling means and how is it different to independent services? Because it seems very similar, right? So independent services, loose coupling, this seems like a same terminology, but not really. Making services independent, it's easy. You just take a functionality and you split it into different small services. But are they loosely coupled, right? Can they actually exist independently? Can you turn down one service and still have the other service running? This is one of the fundamental and important principles when building microservices based architectures. And this is where it fails a lot of times. People often just take one part but completely forgot the other one. And with that, they create what Justus already mentioned, a distributed monolith, right? So taking things that are very coupled together, depend on each other a lot, and just deploy them independently. By that, they create even more complexity and make life even harder. So one of the important things to consider when designing microservices architecture is to make sure your services are loosely coupled. They do not depend on each other. And that's also related a little bit to API-driven communication. Most of the microservices architectures I've seen are using RESTful APIs to communicate between services, right? Typical APIs that are most common today. But that's not the only way how microservices should communicate. RESTful APIs are great. They are very easy to understand. They are relatively easy and simple to build. But they are also, let's say, complex in nature because they create high coupling. Right? One service calls another service and waits for response. It's a synchronous communication. It's communication where if you don't get response from one service, your service that calls that other service cannot exist, right? Cannot work. So I always encourage when we design microservices, both in my current startup and prior to that, I was a CTO and CPO at a company called Mambu, which is a globally leading cloud banking platform. When my team designs microservices, we always encourage asynchronous communication, which can be event-driven, message-oriented, doesn't matter too much. What matters is that as a service, I request certain action from another service, but I don't wait for that action to be fulfilled to continue my own process, to continue my own journey. It's much harder to implement, but as a result, it makes architecture simpler. And I'll get back to that. It's an interesting differentiation, easy versus simple, which is not equally understood sometimes. And last but not least, polyglot programming. And it's not just about programming, as Justus mentioned before. It can be about databases, it can be about infrastructure. So it's about polyglot architecture in a broader sense. Microservices enable us to apply different architecture mechanisms, technologies for individual services or individual set of services. You don't have to do that if you don't need, right? But important is that this architecture style enables us to do that. We have optionality. If we decide that in one area we want to use one type of database, we should be able to do that. With monolithic architectures, still possible to achieve, but much harder to do so. So yeah, so these are kind of fundamental principles that are driving microservices architectures. Now, let me get back a little bit to simple versus easy. How many of you know the difference? Can you raise your hand? Do you know the difference between simple and easy? Okay, let's see. Let's see whether you understand the same way as I do. So Marius today mentioned during the introduction that monoliths are simple. Well, I want to challenge that, right? Are they simple or they are easy? Because one of these is true. Monoliths are definitely easy. It's very easy to create something that is close to our understanding, fits well into our mind. Oh, it's just one thing, right? We put everything there. It's easy, but is it simple? I don't think so, because simplicity means one task, one role, right? Something that does only one thing and it does it well. And that's the fundamental difference. Monolith is one thing, but it does everything. Microservice is one thing, but it has one role and one task. And when you do things in a simple way versus easy, you suddenly have a possibility to maintain that one thing much easier without impacting the rest, right? You can evolve that one thing independently. You can fix issues and bugs in that one thing without impacting the rest of the architecture. So I don't have a slide on that, but what Mario said in the morning triggered my thinking that, yeah, we have to actually unpack a little bit the difference between simple and easy. That can be a whole different talk altogether. And I think this is also a very important concept to understand when thinking about moving from monolith to microservices, or even for that sake, another provoking idea, moving from a monolith where everything is interdependent and intertwined into a monolith where things are modular and decoupled, which is also possible. Okay, another question. Is microservices an architecture or an architecture style, right? And what are the differences between these two, and how is it important at all for our conversation today? Let's define what's architecture. In a general sense, architecture is a high-level design that describes different elements or components of a system and how all of them interact together, right? It kind of organizes the overall structure of the system. And when we talk about architecture, we don't necessarily have to care about whether it's microservices or monolith, whether it uses Java or .NET or whatever other technology. It's actually important to first understand what that system is supposed to do, why we are building that system, and how it's organized on a functional level, right? What the responsibilities of that system, how we need to structure it, and how different pieces interact together. And how monolith architectures are going to a wrong direction is by not having an architecture, but just thinking about it as a technological exercise. Or let's just build something, right? This is also very important. Microservices are inherently more complex, but they are also more simple if you do it right. And that's an interesting differentiation back to what we just discussed before. And what is architecture style? Architecture style is already a particular set of principles and practices that you apply to build either the whole system together or individual parts of the system. And when you separate these two concepts, I mean the architecture and architecture style, you suddenly have flexibility to decide whether you want to apply a particular architecture style across the entire system or just across particular domains or basically parts of that system. This is especially important when you are transforming existing monolithic architectures into microservices. You cannot do it, typically you cannot do it successfully all at once. And that's where it's important to understand, okay, how my target architecture should look like purely from structure perspective, what components, domains it will be comprised of, how these domains will interact to achieve specific meaningful business outcomes, and only then apply one or the other architecture style across particular areas of that architecture based on your specific needs. Let's say you know that certain parts of your system require high level of maintenance. You change it more often, or requires different level of scalability or elasticity. The characteristic Justas was talking about, where let's say during Christmas period, certain areas require more scale, and then you need to downscale it, right? So you then would apply microservices architecture style into that particular area of your system first, and then gradually transform the rest of the architecture if that's needed at all, right? So it's a very important differentiation here. Is microservices architecture new at all? Right? Have we seen that before with any other technologies or architecture language, programming languages? And I'm obviously specifically provoking here with Oracle PL SQL. It's not because I advocate to build microservices using Oracle PL SQL, but just want to mention that this approach itself is not new. We did gain some advancements in terms of how different programming languages support microservices ideas today. A lot had happened since the introduction of service-oriented architecture with SOAP-based web services and things like that. We have things like Kafka that is much simpler to use comparing to WebSphere Message Broker and things like that. But at the end of the day, the approach itself is not new. You can easily build microservices architecture using Oracle PL SQL. Oracle PL SQL shares exactly same characteristics. You build independent packages that can be maintained independently, deployed independently. These procedures within Oracle PL SQL packages can interact with other PL SQL packages using internal queue mechanism or database tables, so on and so forth, right? You can even today expose Oracle PL SQL as an API, RESTful API, straight out of the database. So just looking purely from a principles perspective, you can do microservices with PL SQL. Whether you should do that, yes or no, that's a different question, of course, right? The reason why I mentioned that is just to provoke a bit of thinking, should we start with technology or should we really start with understanding what's our architecture, why we're building it in a certain way, what benefits we are trying to achieve with that, and only then, pretty much as a last step, try to think, okay, what technology am I going to use, right? Am I going to use that framework or this framework? Is it going to be built with Java or something else? Because on a grand scale, from a business objectives perspective, this matters less. What matters much more is how exactly you're going to decouple your architecture and where you want to put your effort to potentially introduce more complexity but gain simplicity versus making things maybe easier but not necessarily simple. So that's that part. Now, how does that fit into the overall enterprise architecture, right? Because when we talk about microservices, we mostly talk about architecture of individual systems, right? We take CRM system or core banking or any other system, and we talk about that system in the context of microservices. Should it build as a monolith or microservices? But how about the overall landscape of the enterprise, where sometimes hundreds of systems exist, right? In my previous life, I used to work for one of the top banks in Baltic states, Scandinavian one, not that one, the other one, and we had around 2,000 systems there, right, that were intertwined and connected, and we used service-oriented architecture for that. It's a grandfather of microservices, and of course we didn't know that microservices didn't exist at that point, right? But we thought about all these systems as one big architecture that is interrelated and interact with each other. Today, there's a concept for that. It's called composable business, right? Or in Mambu, we used to call it composable banking. We were actually one of the first companies who started to use that terminology in the market. And then later, Gartner picked it up and it kind of became a thing by itself. But generally, what is composable businesses or composable enterprises? And what's packaged business capabilities within that? It's essentially a big microservice, right? You can call it a macro service. It's an application that fulfills, let's say, a bigger need, right? It's a domain, it's a capability like CRM, like core banking, or maybe core banking can be decoupled further into lending and deposits and ledger, right? It depends already how granular you wanna do that, and then you have other potential options there: buy versus build, or buy plus build, right? You potentially can buy things that are a little bit more commoditized, like potentially you don't want to think how you're going to calculate interest rates for your loans, right? And you want to go and buy this as a service and use it via APIs. And at that point, you don't quite care what's inside, right? Whether it's built out of 5 microservices or 2 microservices or 10 microservices, as long as you have an API that you can easily consume, preferably in asynchronous way by all other applications, right? So it's kind of about moving your the same ideas or the same benefits of microservices, but to the level of enterprise applications. Gartner called this packaged business capability. I mean, I'm not particularly fan of this term, but it makes some sense. It's about treating certain capability as a packaged thing, where all you care about is an API that it communicates with, right? So all of the modern systems um, are, well, most of the modern systems, let's say, are built with that idea in mind. They are built with APIs in mind. SaaS is basically fundamentally following that approach, where all the things SaaS are provided as in the form of APIs, and you can buy today HR management system and talent acquisition system as a set of APIs, combine that with your ERP system, combine it with your core banking system, and create an architecture where you leverage best in class service for each area, versus buying something mediocre from one provider and basically maybe having one functionality that is good, but the rest is just mediocre. It just gives you something, but it's not the best, right? So that approach with composable businesses really allows you to easily switch different parts of your enterprise architecture, easily switch, let's say, CRM system, or easily switch KYC system without potentially breaking everything, right? Or without the need to replace the entire architecture at once if you just want to improve how you do your KYC, or you do your AML, or any other parts of the architecture. So that's just the same, as I said, same approach that we follow on the architecture of individual application, but then apply it to the architecture of the entire organization. Then how much decoupling is enough, right? Why I'm talking about decoupling? Because obviously all the other things we discussed so far were about decoupling, right? Decoupling monolith into microservices, decoupling big enterprise applications into individual business capabilities. What else can we decouple? Well, there's this concept called MACH architecture, where they suggest to decouple further your presentation tier from the rest of the architecture, right? The things that are used for your users or your customers to engage with your service, provided you are providing some sort of digital service. I'm talking about it just for the transparency as an intro to what we offer as a company, right? Not to confuse you. You don't necessarily have to apply Mac for everything, but I want to explain how Mac can be leveraged specifically in digital banking space, right? And why we, as Plumery, decided to follow that approach to build our digital engagement platform. So who are we and what we do, right? As I mentioned before, we provide a new generation digital banking platform that sits on top of core banking infrastructure, such as core banking system itself, AML, KYC, and all other systems, card management system, and focusing specifically on powering up digital channels, mobile applications, web applications that end users are using. And we do that by combining buy plus build approaches, right? We are saying you should be buying things that are non-differentiating, things that are more or less the same, across the globe, across different organizations. And you do that to establish feature parity with what's expected by the market today. But at the same time, you should be able to build what's unique and differentiating for you. And we say, buy for parity, build for competitive edge. So that's what we do. We are providing a platform that enables that, gives certain capabilities out of the box as a set of APIs, of course, built with microservices behind the scene, but that's less relevant. What's relevant is that they are completely independent, can be used independently, but we also give the entire DevSecOps environment, which is optional, but helpful to create your own capabilities in a bespoke way. How this is related to MAG that I mentioned just before, we believe that the user interface itself, the mobile application, the web application, is something that is relatively easy to build today. It doesn't require a lot of effort, it doesn't cost a lot of money, but at the same time, that's the part where most of the organizations want to differentiate themselves. This is where everyone wants to look different, not just have different colors and different logos, but essentially build user journeys in some sort of unique and differentiating way. So we leave our customers with the ability to do it in a completely flexible and free way without locking them into specific design ideas that we had. But we take away the complexity, the underlying complexity of that digital brain, as we call it, all the functionalities that you need to power up your mobile and web applications. From enabling transaction cleansing and categorization and searching across your transactions in a Google-like search, to facilitating notifications, push SMS, email, to providing message center to communicate between a bank in a broader sense, employee and the user. By bank, I mean any company, digital wallet, crypto wallet, whatever functionality or whatever type of organization you may be. Managing cards, requesting new cards, managing digital onboarding. We do that with cooperation with some of our partners like SumSup and Forceline and a few other ones. Multi-factor authentication that has a pluggable mechanism to add additional methods that potentially we don't have implemented but are specific in one or the other country. Like we don't have bank ID in Sweden, but it's easy to add that new method into our platform. So that's basically what we do. We try to simplify. On one hand, we try to simplify and accelerate the journey to build digital channels. On the other hand, we give all the necessary flexibility to differentiate yourself where it matters most, from the UI itself to building additional functionality in the backend using our microservices templates, our microservices architecture principles, event-driven, asynchronous, all the things we thought about, all the experience of building such platforms for the last 20 plus years. We try to put it into our architecture. Yeah, I'll probably skip a few things because I already mentioned them. This is essentially what I meant before. Typically, what's expected when our customers are just trying to build a new mobile application. They feel like they can just build a mobile app, a web app, and integrated that with core and done job. In reality, this is not the case. In reality, there is a whole thing here that needs to be implemented really to facilitate these digital journeys on the top. And that's exactly our focus, right? We give some acceleration here as well. We give template web application, template mobile application with all the source code that our customers can change. But our focus really is here, providing functionality that simply doesn't belong here. Not just doesn't exist, it doesn't belong here, right? And letting our customers focus on what's unique for them. Yeah, so that's basically it. Thanks so much for your attention. What's next for us? Unless you have any questions, by the way, please go ahead. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Question or comment. So if we are comparing this monolith and microservice architecture, should we speak also about the Conway's law? That it's
yes.
And probably we should consider that most typically if you have one integrated development team, so probably the best way, and the result will be one integrated monolith
Yes.
system, and then so if you have different development teams, so probably then the best way would be each develop their microservice. And the problem is that when you start, if one small team tries to build a lot of microservices, then quite often it fails.
Yes.
And so so the Conway's law is that your software architecture just reflects your organizational structure and your organizational
100%.
application line. So what's your opinion?
Yes, you're 100% right. This is definitely an important concept. The Conway's law is essentially idea that architecture is a social concept. First of all, means architecture is a certain agreement, right? How things are. It's not a prescribed thing, right? There's no book that says architecture needs to be like that. It's a social concept. It's about how people agree about it. And for people to agree about right architecture, you have to have a right organizational structure that reflects that. If you're going to put all people in one bucket, they will all agree on monolith or distributed monolith. If you decouple your organization in such a way that every team thinks about their particular business domain, their particular capability that they're building, there are more chances that they will build something loosely coupled, because people don't like to depend on each other, right? And if people don't like to depend on each other, they will build systems that do not depend on each other. As simple as that, right? So that's, yeah, very good comment. Thanks for that.
So welcome everyone to second part, and let me invite our discussion guests. So Yelena, Nora, Sergey, Ben, and me. Choose your place. Yeah. So for a second part, we decided to do a discussion roundtable, speaking about our experiences in microservices and Monolith from various perspectives, ranging from business to technical one. So I think before starting the discussion, maybe let's do the introductions for everyone around who you are, just like in 2 sentences. So we can start from this side.
Yep. Hello. Good morning. My name is Yelena Ansipova, and I'm the CTO at Vicemes Group, fintech company, and we're working already for 13 years. So we have a wide experience working both with monolith systems, which were introduced 13 or even more years ago, and also we have experience currently working with microservices. So I will be happy to share this experience with you today.
Okay, so my name is, sorry, it was me.
I don't know.
So my name is Nora. I'm representing Signet Bank, and I'm here actually, so I'm the representative of that oldish legacy monolith system with all its drawbacks and challenges, and that's going to be, those points that I'm going to point out in this discussion.
Hi, folks. My name is Sergey Viskovskis. I'm leading, being CEO and co-founder of Indima investment platform. We are a regulated and then supervised investment platform based in Riga, offering a new revolutionary discounted debt product coming from Spain. So we built our, I would say, technology core of the platform from scratch. So while building, we use both our proprietary front-end and back-end system and integrated a batch of microservices. So we'll share how it went and then what are the pluses and minuses of using the microservices.
Yeah, and I think me and Ben, we already introduced ourselves, so let's save some time. And let's go straight to discussion. So I would like to kick off first round of questions with business related, and I have a question for Nora. So can you describe from your business side perspective what kind of challenges you are encountering currently with your architecture, which is, as described, quite monolithic and old, and why you are looking for transformation?
I didn't say old. I said
okay,
oldish.
mature.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so well, it's actually a good and decent system, stable. So it does what it
it's supposed to do. So that's a good part. But at the same time, we, of course, we do have experienced some challenges, and so actually currently a bit step back. So this difficult question is lingering around for us, what to do next. So either we keep investing in this existing system and accept its probably some limitations, or accept these drawbacks that it has, or try to find some workarounds for it. At the same time, we do realize that the pace of technological development in financial industry is quite fast. So we do understand that at one point we probably might just not be able to keep up with it. And so the other option is to migrate to something else. But again, it also has a lot of painful moments. And so, well, speaking about those challenges, there are quite a lot of it actually, but the main that I would like to really point out is the difficulties or the lack of flexibility in development. All the developments, it's well, expensive, long, and complicated, and well, yeah, we as a bank, we offer a full range of banking services. So starting with simple current account, ending with complex financial instruments and all the deposits and lending and all the other stuff somewhere in the middle. And in addition to that, there's like risk management, financial management, AML, and all the processes. So it's the system, it handles quite a lot actually. So, and you know, as I say, that if something is built for everything, it's no good for anything. Yeah, but I wouldn't be so harsh in my decision about my opinion on the system. But still, it of course, yes, it is so that it's good for some things, but it's complete rubbish for others. So yeah, so I'm really looking forward to this discussion. Maybe I can find some clarity afterwards, or if not, then maybe at least some things to think about.
For the audience, if you can you describe how much time does it take for you to bring new feature to market? In a months, years?
No, well, it depends, of course, but I would say, you know, not years, not so bad, but yeah, but it's no 6 to 9 months.
6 to 9 months from like start of development when the user can use it.
Yes. No, well, of course, it depends not only on the system, it depends on different, well, the team as well, and also the resources that we have. But yeah, but 6 to 9 months.
Okay. And have you tried to estimate how much investment it would take you to completely switch to new architecture, or you're just at this?
Well, we are currently working on this, so that's why also we decided to take part in this discussion. That's why all this was so interesting to us, because yeah, we are currently looking at these options, and again, as I mentioned, all the services that we're having, it's not so easy to find a system which can actually cover all the functions that we need. Yeah, I know. But and also there are different moments that we need to speak about, and we also understand that maybe it would be some hybrid version, probably microservices or whatever we call them. But we also don't want to increase complexity too much, so that it's not too painful also afterwards to support it, to monitor, not to increase a huge amount of resources that we need to for supporting it. So yeah, so that would be like summary of where we stand and what's with the situation.
Oh, all right. Yeah. So since we are digging deeper in this monolith architecture and the challenges, so I basically have a rough question for everyone sitting here in the discussion table. So usually when a monolith is developed with a single team, and sometimes in extreme cases single person, so maybe you can share what kind of challenges this approach causes you. So Elena, we can start from you.
Yes, from my experience, there are different pros and cons for both approaches. So yeah, this looks very nice for business sometimes, that I have one person.
Yeah, it's very cheap. 1 FT.
I have this one contact point, so I can just ask him all the questions, and this one person will do everything. But then again, you cannot scale. So this scaling and this knowledge transfer, in case you need to enlarge your team, then this knowledge transfer is quite complicated. And also documentation, documenting microservices or documenting huge monolith system with describing all dependencies between the parts of the systems. So this is quite challenging. In case we're talking about development from scratch, then for sure, time to market, I would say that with microservices would be even longer, because you need to develop many independent systems. But in case you're doing something with like one system, where just we need a proof of concept, we want to go to the market, and this will be faster, I would say. But this is, yeah, not strategic view, because later you will need to rework it, definitely. So, and also talking about the competences, it is you should always have a good architect in your team. That's true. But if you're working with microservices, this is really crucial to have this good architect. Otherwise, you will separate all the functionalities in the wrong way, and then it will be just a mess of many systems. But in case of monolith, it might live with a bit poor architecture, let's say, for a bit longer time.
So I guess maybe you have some insights from like more businessy side. What kind of risks having single team, single person causes you from business side?
Yeah, so basically for me it was like the first time we were building our proprietary monolith system. I mean, when we started in Dima 2 years ago. So I'd say the main retrospective which I could share is that everything goes to the like working or like putting input on the technical description, because as like I suppose Elena and Dora will agree, the most biggest nightmare for a development team is then when business sets the technical description, and after 1 month they will starting adding like, okay guys, so we just had a good like brainstorm, let's change the front. We didn't like how the front looks, we changed it completely, but at the same time like development team is working on the backend, and they, okay, well, you're great guys. So yeah, so I would say the main concern and the thing which you should stick to is working on the detailed technical description, which should be signed off by all the stakeholders, and only then it goes to the development team. And if somebody wants to change something, it should be really substantiated, and basically maybe the guy who is doing this, you could charge him a penalty from the salary if he gives such an opinion to change. Yeah. So then everybody are focused. Of course, joking. But on the other hand, the second success key is that when the your core model is ready, then all the things, even of course during the development, there is some bits and details, and the devil is in the details, as we say. Then you should also create your own wiki. I mean the final description of the functionality, because and it should be in such a detail that if even some of your like senior or team senior developers or your team leads change, each new person which join your company could have a read and understand what is inside of the bear, I would say. So yeah, so basically technical documentation, once again the technical documentation, and not going left and right during the development process. Otherwise, it's end up with like additional months, hours, weeks of development, and like everybody of us here knows that like development team is one, or I would say the most expensive resource which a tech company has now.
Yeah, well, from my as a technical guy perspective, I would say having a small team or working alone as a man. So like documentation, I do not see a purpose why I have to write documentation for myself if I'm the one reading it. So it's very hard for me while doing technical work also force me to write documentation, because if I'm only consumer, why do I have to write? And technical guy, nothing demotivates more technical guy as pointless tasks. So this is like logical change. So with larger team, you see that, yeah, there is a point, like people change. Another thing is that, yeah, one man orchestras, not always, there are a lot of people who can be good on all layers.
I understand it's
and they tend to leave.
Well, it's completely what my CTO told me, that Sergey, I'd better work with the team rather than making the papers. But for us, I mean, for regulated business, like you have like audits on the audit. So basically, in case of Indimo, we like launch in June for beta investors, and we just launch the platform in September for the crowd, for everybody. And we already had like 3 audits. We had audit from the Central Bank of Latvia. We had audit from the like internal audit, like internal external audit, and new audit from Central Bank of Latvia is just starting now. So if you don't have the technical documentation, basically, especially in this year 2023, like for us investment services providers, I mean both banks and then platforms, etc. In EU level, like it's a top priority for ESMA. So ESMA is like European Security and Market Authority, like the main policymaker for all the EU, like the barbell where all of us are living and basically following all the regulation from EU. Then the top priority is checking that all the IT systems of investment services providers are compliant with all the regulation, because it was not a focus of the regulators during last years. So even if like I spent around decade in one of the largest banks in Latvia, like IT regulation, IT compliance was just like guys, let's like have some like paper on the shelf, like just to be, and etc. Now it's really changed, because we see like a big risks, and like imagine that one day, I don't know, the biggest banks which we could see here, like on over the window, like are attacked, and all money like it disappears, and like it will be a big pain, I suppose, for all the Baltics. So it's a top priority now. So the technical documentation really solves the problem when audits take place. You will not be able to pass the audit if you don't have the technical. But even if you are like, I understand that like it's cost benefit for my team, which is not still like we're having like 20 plus like team for the whole Indimo. But of course, like using resource of my CTO for preparing the documentation is not the great like business decision, but you need like adapt it. On the other hand, like of course we should understand that like we are or humans, like it could be like stone could you go and like some stone hits your head, and there is also like everything could happen.
Put a lot of papers
Well, yeah, it's a matter of course, yeah, of execution. But yeah, so like people come, people go, and then everything could happen. So if you don't the technical documentation, it could be like for us, for investment services provider, it could be critical, because it's a critical infrastructure. Also, regulators say that technological base of the platform is a critical infrastructure, because even if all the board, I mean, all the team disappears, the platform will work for some while, you know. But if the technological base disappears, that there is nothing on the ground. There is like no company like left.
Yeah. Ben, maybe you can throw in a few cents from your journey, how to unravel these problems and solve them with distributing the approach from your experience.
People and documentation, you mean that particular area, or
no, just like this monolith, single team, single person problem, how can it be solved moving forward?
Yeah, I think one person team is not a team, right? So team implies that there are at least two people. And I tried different approaches in my career. I think when I just started my career, we didn't have a lot of methodologies and practices, right? It just was emerging. We didn't talk about agile too much, but we were trying to do things as efficient as possible, and we had teams of 2-3 people doing specific initiatives and doing it end to end. And then we started to talk about agile and structuring teams with two pizza sizes from 6 to 8 people and so on and so forth. Certain things worked, certain things didn't work. And interestingly enough, now I am switching back to what I did 20 years ago and having small teams of 2-3 people focusing on individual capabilities and doing them to the point that they are usable. Right. So this is approach that was introduced by a company called Basecamp, quite known company doing, let's say, CRM/communication platform. And they call this method Shape Up. I do recommend everyone to check it out. It's essentially about structuring teams as small as possible, right? The idea is to keep teams as small as possible, but not one person, like 2-3 people. And doing documentation also in a lean way, really kind of decomposing a little bit a term documentation into very specific things, right? So if it's for compliance, looking into whether there are other ways to provide evidence to auditors apart from documentation, because the challenge with documentation is that it becomes outdated very fast, right? So it's like a code that you need to maintain. Your code evolves, your documentation needs to evolve. So it's a huge liability. You definitely should have it, but it's always a balance, right? So maybe you can also provide evidence with other things, especially now with automation and cloud. A lot of things can be proven differently, not just with documentation. And your truth, whether we like it or not, is not in documentation. Your truth is actually in the code, in automation scripts. That's what reality lives, right? So you may have an impression that you are super protected because you have a lot of documentation and a lot of papers. But if your code evolved since then and you have gaps there, you still have a problem, right? So that's one of the fundamental challenges, how to bridge that gap between the reality and documentation. So one of the suggestions, as I said, is to first decompose it a little bit and see what's the purpose, who is it written for, do we want to invest in maintaining it, or there are other ways to address the same. For instance, we follow a process, a combination of process that is called RFC, a request for comments, which is essentially before we start doing something big and we know that we need to solicit feedback from others, we put that RFC, which is lean. And the moment RFC, we solicited feedback and we decided to implement something, we know that this is no longer a maintained document. But then after that, we typically take architectural decisions that are important. So we document them separately, and we call this, it's not our invention, but we use ADR, Architecture Decision Record, where we record significant architecture decisions independently, right? And if they change, there will be a next ADR that replaces the previous one. So it's a sort of a lean approach to the same thing that Sergey was mentioning. And when team is small, you don't have to align a lot, right? So if as a team of 2-3 people, I need to write an ADR, I will write that ADR, I will share it with others, get feedback, and proceed forward, move faster. So
yeah, for me it sounds like even with documentation, the same principle. If we split the responsibility that each service write its own documentation, we do not overwhelm one person on top, keeping it up to date and writing to it, and also give specific purpose. So that's also kind of, instead of having 1 or 2 persons just constantly trying to catch up with documentation, we can basically distribute that load.
Yeah, and plus one other thing probably important to mention, these days there are approaches how documentation can be generated. Like certain things can live inside code itself that can be used then to create a proper document that can be read by a person, right? Architectural approaches like C4 and other things that really help you to generate documentation rather than writing it. And as soon as you generate it, you can really trust that this is aligned with what's in your code, right? It's real. It's not just.
But what I was always interested. What is the quality of it? Because this like self-documenting code, it's quite good. But is it for developers, or can I use that same auto-generated documentation straight away for these audits?
See, the idea here is that you still write that documentation, but it lives in the code. Means when you change the code, if you are diligent developer, you see that documentation that is just next to it is outdated. So you update it as well. It's like updating comments in your code, right? So then your documentation is not fully generated from by some AI or something, right? Which actually today even that is available, but it's actually generated from the snippets that are provided by same people who write code. Sometimes it needs a bit of rework to make the language a bit better, right? If you want to show it to auditors, but it's already better than just writing it completely on the site independently. And with microservices, that's actually going back to our actual topic, right? With microservices, this actually works very well because then you don't document one huge system, you document each capability independently. Your documentation evolves independently. It's easier to read it. It's easier to understand it, even for auditors, right? If we ignore for a second that it's important for colleagues that will join later, will need to understand how things work. Even for auditors, if you just give them one big paper, well, maybe for company it's good because they will never read it, right? They're like, oh, okay, looks good. But but with small ones, they can actually read it and maybe provide even some meaningful feedback. Who knows?
Well, maybe to add on what Ben told, like from our experience, so about the external services and then the approach of regulator. So when we started, so basically, one of the key modules, I mean, one of the key microservices is ML systems, which should be integrated. So one of them, like if we speak about like online investment platform as we are, then you're not able to open the branch, where like some bank clerk sits and then the set clients open the account. So everything goes online smoothly in as a one-stop solution, and identification service is a key things that you should add. And like of course now there is a plenty of different like there is many services which offer the online identification. There many of them sit in the Baltics. I would say Baltics is like maybe like some sort of very well developed here for such services. But anyway, what I wanted to say is that there was a dilemma which service to choose. There was like several services from Lithuania. There is also like several services from Estonia, and we choose the service from Estonia because some of the market players on the market in Latvia, which are regulated like in Latvia, had, because it was easier to sell out to the Latvian central bank, because for the central bank they are more clear. So they already checked like either their because still even we are all in EU and ML regulations are very the same. Still each regulator has its own, like I would say, sentiment what they want to see from this service. For example, in Germany, if we speak about German market, they don't accept identification as a selfie. They want to have the video interview with the agent. So BaFin will not allow you to use like the Baltic service which we have here. Yeah. So in terms of the regulation, yeah, you need to adapt also to the vendors which already went the way with your regulator. For them it's clear. Otherwise, like to try to otherwise, if you choose some new one, you should reserve like several of months of discussion with your regulator to prove them that this new vendor is good and fit.
Maybe from my side, one comment about documentation. We should here understand that there are different types of documentation. It seems like we have just messed it all together. So we have documentation which is for regulator, and in these terms, it is really easier to describe microservices because it is clear. Like you see microservices, you understand what the system is doing. And another thing is about documentation, internal technical documentation for basically for the team to work with it. just because there are some services in which you might need changes once a year. You just don't remember how it was implemented. And, or for example, some changes in the team, you need to enlarge the team, or someone maybe left your team and you need to replace this person. And then it is much easier to work with microservices because there is much less magic happening in small service, and it is much easier to understand it for developer when he just is reading the code of one small system. It is much easier than to read the huge monolith code.
Yeah, and following this topic, since we spoke about regulations, microservices, so another one important thing, I would say, it's security. And when you are having monolith, from security-wise, you can just construct your perimeter around monolith. When we switch to microservices, suddenly we need not only to care about our perimeter defense, but also about security between our microservices. And in some cases, for example, like with Ben's case, maybe part of our system is third party, so we need to care about that. So maybe, Yelena, you can tell about, from your side, how do you strike balance between investing in security and developing new features? What drives you? Your startup, is it hard to balance security and development velocity, or
in our case, I will not reveal all the technical details due to security reasons. But I would say that from the security perspective, Microservices has some advantages as well, because you have all your data separated. So in case you have this one monolith, okay, you have maybe less endpoints to protect, but then in case someone is getting there, it's all revealed. Yeah. So you're just getting everything what is there. You can get all the code.
I think main weakness is if you breach that initial defense, everything else it's like in front of your plate.
Yeah. And in case you're trying to protect each service separately, and even in worst case scenario, something goes wrong and someone has got the access to one of your services, maybe the impact will not be that big, because there is only isolated part of data, and in some cases this data will give nothing to the one who has got this access. So
but
there are some challenges also.
Yeah, but does this additional engineering overhead impact a lot your development speed? Or you would say that it is here, but it's not like main.
We are not using maybe that many external services. I mean, we are doing everything in-house. So we do not have any teams developing for us anything. So in these terms, we have still this parameter. And also we are managing our own private cloud. So this is not a problem as well. Yeah, so we have a bit maybe less challenges, and these challenges are not that much bigger if we compare with Monolith. Yeah, so, and in case we have all the internal communication between our services in this parameter, then it is easier to work with that. So it's not that challenging, I would say.
Oh, okay, nice. And Nora, from your perspective, from business side, when developing on Monolith or transitioning, do you put security on a separate line, or it's just like integrated?
Security is on top of everything. So we banks, not all of us can, of course, but still banks, we are conservative and we are very cautious, sometimes probably overcautious. Probably my security, not my, but our company security people would not agree with me. But well, yeah, sometimes it is a bit, again, complicated to get something through to them. But yeah, so for us, security, it's yeah, top priority. So it's also a burden. No, I can't say a burden, but it's a hassle that we have to also think about in this development process.
But does it sometimes put you in a situation where you have to choose a new feature or security? And kind of?
No, yes, yes. But no, well, until this moment, we still have found our ways how to handle those parts, like the development and the security. But yeah, definitely security is first. So that's why I was really eager to hear answers on this question. So if I understood correctly, then when we finalized on the documentation on the team, so microservices did win. So on security wise,
Security-wise, so far it's like looks like that microservices gives you a little bit more effort, but also in turn it gives you more security since when you could get in traditional monolith. So at least from that side of discussion. So maybe Ben, you would like to throw in how cloud native systems
Yeah,
so this balance.
Yeah, we can take it layer by layer, right? First of all, I fully agree with what Elena said, that microservices in general reduce attack blast, right? So if one service is attacked, others hopefully are not. Of course, for that, we need to design system in a certain way, right? And today, let's say the most common approach is so-called zero trust, where there is a zero trust, right? And everything needs to be authorized and authenticated, right? And services, when they communicate with each other, they need to authenticate themselves. When call comes from outside, it needs to be authenticated. And today there are technological, let's say, mechanisms or libraries that help with that a lot, right? So you don't need to implement it every time for each microservice independently. You just define it once and then can use for your entire architecture. Yes, you need to spend a bit of time designing this upfront, but again, you're not reinventing the wheel. There's enough patterns and practices in the industry how to do that well, right? With service mesh and other type of technologies that you just design once, implement, and then all your microservices will follow exactly the same approach. So that's one part. In terms of cloud native, as you mentioned, right? So again, cloud native can mean different things, but let's say we're talking about using public clouds. So how public clouds are more secure than potentially private clouds, and no offense, right? I'm not saying private clouds are not secure, but how potentially public clouds are more secure is because there's economies of scale playing there, right? Vendors like AWS, they or similar ones, it doesn't matter which vendor, they are facing challenges of magnitude of customers, right? So they are forced to continuously improve based on the feedback and situations they face from a lot of customers. When you are owning and building your own data center, you are limited to your own learnings. And whether we like it or not, in our industry, it's all about trial and error and failures and learning from these failures. So the more failures you have, the more equipped you are, right? The more you learned and the more you fixed. And if you are isolated, you don't have a chance to have as many learnings as public cloud providers have. So that's at least the philosophy that I believe in.
Was waiting to jump in into this and to defend private cloud a bit. Anyway, you need to do pen tests. In any case, it doesn't matter how you're managing your infrastructure. And also, there is always this thing about knowledge. Everything depends on how good is your DevOps. You have set up your infrastructure in the public cloud. So you have too many options there now. So these products are quite complicated, and a person should have really good knowledge to not to open some ports, not to leave some backdoors. So it's also quite challenging to set it up correctly.
100%. I think it's, as I said, probably even more challenging than doing it on the public cloud. Right? So you do need to have expertise. You do need to have knowledge. You potentially need to use products that presumably can bring some similar type of accumulated experience from a good number of customers. So definitely there are ways to make private clouds very secure. It's just, yeah, it's
but let's say you should have good specialists in any case. in both public clouds or private cloud management.
So from technology side, if you have right people, they can make any system work. It's just that probably a question at that single moment of time, do you have right equipment, right money, and right people? And usually public cloud at least solves you that part, that they can cover you on resilient hardware and experienced people. So,
But I think it's important not to underestimate technologies that exist today to build private clouds in such a way that you don't reinvent the wheel. You don't start from scratch. You use a lot of knowledge and experience that comes with that. So.
Yeah, so even like working with Google, I see that most successful SaaS products, they eventually make some on-prem version for also to people to port back to have same experience we have in the cloud, same ease also on-prem. So it is definitely a trend. So Sergey's from CEO perspective, this was security concern. How does it impact your microservices startup?
Well, with a reference to what Nora said, that like 6-9 months. So for a bank, yeah, like it's fine. Like, but for a startup as we are, like, so you will die like in 6 months if you're adding new product.